Welcome to Classical Music in Color. I'm Judlin Gibson. This is the podcast highlighting musicians of color and their works, expanding the canon beyond the white curtain. The U.S. Marine Band says no to some high school musicians. Loving versus Virginia, the opera, prepares for its debut. And there's a couple of competitions waiting for your application. This is Classical Music in Color. Our first story really breaks my heart. The new administration's stance on DEI has affected a program designed to lift up underserved high school musicians. I reported on this in 2024 in the November 3rd week edition of Staccato, the other podcast I host and produce. It was called An Opportunity for High School Wind Musicians. Imagine being a high school musician playing with the President's own, the U.S. Marine Band in Washington, D.C. That's what Equity Arc is offering for high school musicians who play a wind instrument. It's for a new program called the Equity Arc Wind Symphony. McGee Capsuto is the Associate Director of Equity Arc.
We had a really great opportunity to connect with Captain Darren Lynn, who is the Associate Director of the President's own United States Marine Band. And we basically just started to explore what a collaboration could look like. And this resulted in this new program.
Well, that's all done now. You see, Equity Arc is a nonprofit organization out of Chicago providing support for young BIPOC musicians. They also give a heads up to institutions of music to take steps toward equity and inclusion. Amid this mission, the Marine Band canceled the program, the Equity Arc Wind Symphony. The reason given, according to the Washington Post, was it was canceled due to recent executive orders. Here's McGee Capsuto on their hopes for the Equity Arc Wind Symphony with the President's own U.S. Marine Band.
You know, in most orchestras, you're going to have maybe 2 or 3 oboes. And so with the Wind Symphony, there are just more of those instruments, many more oboes, many more horns, trumpets. So it's really just about kind of the number of seats that we can have in a wind symphony.
Now, 30 young musicians from across the country who earned their spots in the program won't have this opportunity. We'll be back in a moment with the opera Loving versus Virginia, performing soon with some really high-powered talent off stage. Some of you may have seen those star-studded movies or TV shows that featured anyone who was on the A-list or maybe the B-list. Many of those endeavors have not been good or even entertaining. That is not the situation with a star-studded new opera premiering next month in Virginia. Loving versus Virginia tells the true story of the groundbreaking 1967 U.S. Supreme Court case centered on the interracial marriage of Mildred and Richard Loving. The justices struck down all anti-miscegenation laws remaining in the nation. So what's this star-studded part? 2 of the best opera singers in the country are not performing in this opera. One is directing it. Mezzo-soprano Denise Graves, who's graced some major stages over her career, is now directing the production of Loving versus Virginia. And bass baritone Damian Jeter,
Bravo, signor padrone, ora incomincio a capire mistero.
he composed the music with librettist Jessica Murphy Moore. I talked to Graves and Jeter separately, but their passion for this particular project burns bright.
I live in Chicago now, but being a Virginia born and bred, raised individual, it feels like an honor to be able to tell this story in this way. That, just these kind of everyday Americans just trying to live their lives and be in love and be married wanted to do. And I'm sure that they had no idea what the outcome was going to be. I think it's an important story, especially in the times we're living in now. And just to be reminded that action has purpose, and to not sit on your laurels and think that you can't do anything, because actually you are very powerful on your own.
Even though the backdrop during that time in the 50s was one of, real, in some places, still separation, segregation, that county somehow managed to live together in harmony. And so they grew up together. And, to them, it wasn't a big deal at all. They were kids, they grew up together. He was very good friends with her brother, and they all hung out, was at the house. They knew each other's families. And then later on, they fell in love. And that was supported in the county where they grew up in. And then they went to Washington, D.C. to get married. They came back, and then somehow this news got out, that had happened. 2:00 in the morning, the police broke into the house, and that was very much orchestrated too, because also having sex with someone of a different race was also against the law. Not only was marrying someone of another race against the law, but also having sex with someone was against the law. So they orchestrated that to happen at 2:00 in the morning.
Virginia Opera asked me in 2021 or 2022, I can't remember now, to write this piece. They actually came to me with the idea, and it was sort of already in the wheelhouse of things that I write, kind of anyway. So immediately I said yes. The process it's been pretty good. I mean, at that time it was my fourth opera, and the process it's been very nice and easy, and it's good to work with folks like Denise and the folks at Virginia Opera too.
So he got in touch with me and said, I'm writing this opera about the groundbreaking Supreme Court case, Loving versus Virginia, and I would love for you to direct it. And I said, what? I would be so honored, and I am, to be a part of that, And so right now, as we speak, I'm directing another opera. It's called The Tongue and the Lash, and that's about the 1965 debate between James Baldwin and William F. Buckley, that debate that happened in Cambridge in London. And that was amazing. So that's written by another Damien. His name is Damien Sneed. The landmark, Loving versus Virginia, it was much more than a legal victory. It was really a testament, first of all, to the enduring power of love, to resilience, to the fight for justice. And the name, is just so perfect. And their personalities also so perfect, very unassuming, very genteel people, super mild-mannered. And so these two, very unassuming, very simple people who just wanted to live a life, loving each other, and didn't think that there was anything wrong with that.
What kind of musical concept were you going for?
Well, I drew a little bit from the eras of the 50s and 60s, but not a lot. There are definitely nods to that. But it's contemporary classical music, if you want to approach it there. There are atonal moments. There are moments that are very kind of lush and romantic, and there's a bluegrass moment in the very beginning. But all of that music is there to support the drama. So whatever I came up with in terms of like supporting the story through the music, that's the type of music that I wrote. So there's a couple of rock moments. There's a bluegrass moment. There's a very folksy type element that's involved, because these folks were, sort of down home, everyday people.
But he couldn't do it without the words of the librettist Jessica Murphy Moo.
She wasn't sure if she was the one who was to write this, but she's very much the person who's supposed to write this because she's in an interracial marriage, so she has some experience there. So I know that this case means a lot to her.
In fact, as both Graves and Jeter tell it, most of the production crew and the cast were all in interracial relationships or were the products of them. The cast of Loving versus Virginia is now in rehearsals. They will perform all over the Commonwealth of Virginia starting April 25th in Norfolk, then in Fairfax on May 3rd, and in Richmond on May 9th. All involved hope it becomes part of the opera repertoire. Director Denise Graves.
You want it to be in the repertoire. We want one of the things that we want to do is unlock the canon, right? And we're saying that Mozart's great. We're saying Beethoven and all those guys were great too. They were amazing masters. But we're saying that there are a lot of other masters too that we want, women that we want to put in there as well, African American men and women. People want to see relevant stories. They want to see stories and they want to see themselves reflected on the stage. And we're seeing that more and more often.
Oh, I mean, I hope it goes on to have a happy life afterward. That's the hope of any composer, I think. I didn't put all this work into it to be performed. Well, it's going to get at least, 7 performances, so that's good.
Director Denise Graves and composer Damian Jeter. We end this segment of Classical Music in Color with Lullaby from the opera Loving versus Virginia. Soprano Flora Hawk sings as Mildred Loving about the birth of her daughter Peggy. She was pregnant with Peggy when she was thrown in jail for marrying a white man. Soprano Flora Hawk singing Lullaby from the upcoming world premiere of the opera Loving versus Virginia. The opera was commissioned by the Virginia Opera and the Richmond Symphony in partnership with the Institute for Contemporary Art at Virginia Commonwealth University, co-produced by Virginia Opera and Minnesota Opera. Performances start in Norfolk on April 25th before moving on to Fairfax and Richmond. Click on the links on the Classical Music and Color page on secondstreetdreams.com. Coming up, there's a few competitions that may be of interest, especially if you want to make classical music videos. How many of us actually like to audition for anything? Just like a job interview, there's an art to having a successful audition, as in it gets you the job. The Sphinx organization recognizes that and are working with the National Alliance for Audition Support for an audition intensive. Applications are now open for the event. There will be mock auditions, lessons, master classes, and performance psychology training. And new this year, a faculty sponsorship initiative connecting participants with top-tier coaches. It takes place May 27th through the 29th in Miami Beach, Florida. Get on it. The deadline to apply is March 21st. Those of you who like to make professional-looking videos of your work or someone else's might want to look into this. It's Prospect Art Fourth Wall International Video Biennial Open Call. They're looking for video works for their 2027 programming with the theme Change/Exchange. Winners would have their work screened in places like Los Angeles, Lisbon, and Budapest, and online. Deadline, once again, is fast approaching, March 22nd. Early music musicians and fans, Early Music America has opened applications for their Engagement Awards. It offers up to $2,500 for musicians to promote awareness and appreciation of early music and historical performance. EMA is hoping that the Engagement Awards will draw new audiences and musicians in North, Central, and South America. Unlike other grants, anyone can apply. The deadline, March 28th. Links are on the Classical Music and Color page on secondstreetdreams.com. Our coda this month is a congratulations to Joshua Elmore. He has a new job. This is his performance of Carl Maria von Weber's Bassoon Concerto in F major. Starting later this month, Elmore becomes the principal bassoonist of the San Francisco Symphony. He's already appeared with the orchestra as a guest principal bassoonist. Before he was hired by music director Esa-Pekka Salonen, Joshua Elmore was a member of the Fort Worth Symphony, where he had been the principal bassoonist since 2021. Congratulations again to Joshua Elmore. Thank you so much for listening to the March 2025 edition of Classical Music in Color. We're on the Second Street Dreams audio network, on the radio, and on the Triple W. I'm Judlyn Gibson.